Okay, thank you for staying. Am I going to try my Cub Scout technique? If you can hear me, clap once. Yes. If you can hear me, clap twice. If you can hear me, clap 3 times. Woohoo! It works on grown-ups too. Thank you all for staying. The goal with this panel, and the reason we've made it open to anyone who wanted to come, was to just give you a quick update, quick round the room, if you like, about clinical trials that are currently recruiting in Australia. So I'm going to start. Have you got my slides, hopefully? I've got my timer on, and I am going to use timer, let's get that sorted. So we've given each person 3 minutes just to tell you a little bit about their trial. If you want more information, there's information on the poster board out the front. 1 second, okay. We're also, so our goal is to provide you with information, not to convince you to join any particular trial. You need to have a look at those trials, ask lots of questions, decide if it's a good fit for you, and if it looks like a trial that you think you'd be interested in, reach out to the study coordinator. And we can go from there. All right, so I'm going to rush over this bit because we want to give you time to get ready for dinner as well if you're going. These are the trials we're going to talk about. Clinical trials are really important. They're the bridge between some of the research that you heard today and actually getting something into the clinic. They provide us with critical information around safety and efficacy, so whether it's a good idea to use it and whether it's going to work. They underpin the regulatory process. If we don't get good clinical trial data, we're not going to get these drugs approved. And finally, we're beginning to see this happen a little bit in Australia, but clinical trials can be a form of therapy option. You see it more in the cancer fields, but clinical trials as a therapy, as a thing. And the more trials we can get happening in Australia, the more options we have
available. Whether there are differences in
and in the
envelope. Thank you to all of the
my elephant in the room. So this is not a trial that's recruiting, but a very, very brief update on DCCR. So we already heard from Yun Hee Cho in terms of the state of the science. In June, Soleno filed a new drug application, which is the next step towards getting the drug approved. A couple of days ago, we heard that they are undergoing priority review, which is excellent news. The date's not set in stone. It's more of a goal than a definitive date, but the expectation is that we will have news by the end of the year, so that's pretty exciting. The question we get asked a lot is, what does that mean for us down here in Australia? Once the drug is FDA approved, then it becomes possible for us to consider bringing it down through various special access schemes. There are costs and there are barriers to this. So what we are doing is working with Soleno to encourage them to submit their data to the TGA so that we can get it approved down here in Australia and then registered on the PBS. And we'll be we've started some conversations with people in New Zealand to see what we can achieve on that front as well. Well, not we, the broad royal we. Now I have to remember what it said. We're also going to be working, that's my time, we're also going to be working to do whatever we can to facilitate the approval process, and we'll be reaching out to families as we go to help get you engaged in that process as well. Now, the people you come to hear from, we're going to start with Tania, if that's okay, and as a bit of a heads up from Tania, we'll go to Anne. So Tania's trial is on Tirzepatide. We should have some slides for you there as well. I'm going to take that.
My own. Thanks. 3 minutes is impossible for me, but so you've all heard about these new amazing drugs. And any of you who were here earlier would have heard Alex's very nice talk with his much better graphics than mine. But we're talking about a drug related, similar to Ozempic that everyone's heard about. The one that we want to study, that we're all interested in, is Tirzepatide, which Semaglutide or Ozempic at the 2.5 milligram dose is associated with 15% body weight loss in people with obesity, and this drug Tirzepatide, which has 2 gut hormones in it, is associated with 21% body weight loss, which is fantastic. So, of course, a lot of people are wondering, what is it going to do for our patients with severe obesity and Prader-Willi? Why isn't that working? What am I doing wrong? That one? No? I'm pressing the green arrow. But I don't actually need the slide because I've got my own here. So now these drugs we don't know exactly how they work, but we know there's receptors in the brain, GLP-1 and this other hormone, GIP, in the brain, and that reduces appetite. They also have effects on the bowel, as you would have heard those who were here earlier today. And some people with Prader-Willi, however, have bowel problems as well. And this is something that is quite... Oh, how do we get to that one? Back. Or did I skip one? No. Back one. Next. Sorry, I've used up my 3 minutes. People with bowel problems have significant... People with Prader-Willi have significant bowel problems, and this has been studied very minimally. You know about the severe, luckily very rare problem where massive distension of the stomach can occur, particularly after a binge, which can be fatal. But if we look at the literature, I am only aware of 3 published studies that show, well, one of them looking at there are 2 of these looked at gastric emptying, which everyone says it's delayed in people with Prader-Willi, but there's very little study of this. Of these 2 studies, I've used up my time, only one, okay, I have to stop. But take my word for it, there's very little data on delayed gastric emptying. There's very little data. There's one study that's looked at lower bowel function, and we know constipation is a huge problem in our patients with Prader-Willi syndrome. And these drugs, which act in the brain, also act on the bowel. So we need to know what Tirzepatide does. This is hopeless. What Tirzepatide does to the bowel function. So the aim of our study is to look at whether these new incretins like Tirzepatide will promote weight loss in people with Prader-Willi. Will they be safe? And will they be helpful in the management of people with Prader-Willi syndrome? So we're doing a short study. Everybody's going to get the active drug. We're going to do very interesting studies, gastric emptying studies that Alex talked about, but also studies looking at the large bowel with an Australian study, a gas sensing capsule where there's no radiation, unlike others, to measure gastric transit and large bowel transit. So we get not only from this trial will we get, I'm quite passionate about it, so this trial we think will teach us more about bowel function in Prader-Willi that will help guide treatment of our patients, provide safety data on this Tirzepatide, this new drug that's amazing in people with what I'll call simple obesity, whether it's safe in people with Prader-Willi, and we'll get some preliminary data on what this drug does to appetite, behaviour, weight and metabolic parameters in people with Prader-Willi, such that if it does actually look promising, then we will have data to support a larger trial. Thank you. 6 minutes.
I'll try and talk fast. Oh, there's the arrow. So I'm from Harmony Biosciences. I come from Chicago, and I'm an operational person running this trial. Our study is a phase 3 randomized double-blind placebo-controlled efficacy and safety study. And then it's followed by an open label extension that lasts a year in people living with Prader-Willi syndrome. The primary objective is excessive daytime sleepiness. So our drug, pitolisant, is approved for use in excessive daytime sleepiness in people with narcolepsy or in cataplexy. It is not approved for use in people living with Prader-Willi syndrome, but we're thinking that it will potentially be helpful in people who have excessive daytime sleepiness living with PWS. Because we are going to have a group of patients to study, we are also going to look at the severity of irritability, severity of disruptive behaviors, and hyperphagia while we're at it. But the primary objective is that excessive daytime sleepiness. These are some of the inclusion criteria. So male or female, 6 years of age or older, no upper limit, a genetically confirmed diagnosis of PWS. If there is no current, diagnosis that's ever been done, a genetic test, we can do that during screening. And then they must have excessive daytime sleepiness, obviously, at screening and baseline. And we really need a consistent caregiver because the data that we're collecting is through questionnaires that are subjective, and we want to have some consistency in the people who are assessing the patients. For exclusion criteria, anyone who's ever taken pitolisant previously, if there's a diagnosis of sleep apnea, it must be adequately controlled. And then any participation in another research trial that might confound the data. If they aren't on stable doses of medications or they can't continue any prohibited medications, they would be excluded. And then we will do, during screening, sleep, we'll see how much sleep they get a night to make sure that their sleepiness is not from something other than PWS. Here's the study design. So there's a screening and a baseline. That's up to 45 days, but it can be as short as 2 weeks. The treatment period is 11 weeks in where they're receiving either placebo or active drug, and then there's a 52-week open label extension period if they qualify for that. And then there's a 1-month safety follow-up. So what it means for families is about 5 visits if you include the screening, the baseline, and then the visits during the double-blind period. And then just during that year-long part of the study, there are 4 in-person visits. And I mention that because it's hard to travel with people, so it disrupts your life. It's a commitment, but we just want to bring that up. It's 5 in-person visits and then 4 visits during the year, and there's some video telehealth visits as well. And then that, I don't want to get the chicken. So the study has 15 patients currently screened in the US. We're the US licensee of pitolisant. So the main number of people will be enrolled in the US. The largest number of sites will be in the US. But we do have 4 sites planned. I haven't met all of the investigators yet, but we have Sydney Children's Hospital, Queensland Children's Hospital, Royal Prince Alfred Hospital, and Children's Hospital Westmead currently planned. We don't have active sites in Australia right now, but we do have, the study has started in the US, and Dr. Singh has, he screened a patient, I think last week. So we have 11 active sites, and 8 patients who have actually started the study have been randomized in the trial. We expect Australia to come up by the end of the year.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anne. It's not long. And we will have, the reason I'm pushing them through is so that you have time to ask your questions at the end. Lauren, the Acamprosate trial.
Hello. Okay, I'll try to be as quick as I can. So I'm working on a new clinical trial with Tania and her team at the Adult Prader-Willi Clinic in Sydney. So this trial is looking at the GABA system. So GABA is the major inhibiting neurotransmitter in the brain. Essentially, it's a chemical in the brain that helps us turn brain activity off when we don't need it. A few years ago, I worked on a study with Stuart Einfeld, and we found that you can measure brain GABA using MRI, and we measured brain GABA levels in people with Prader-Willi and found that they were significantly lower in people with PWS with severe behaviour problems when compared to people with lower behaviour problems and compared to controls. And the lower levels of behaviour of GABA were associated with higher levels of emotional behaviours such as temper outbursts and depression, as well as autism-like behaviours such as social relating difficulties and a tendency to be self-absorbed. So there are quite a few pharmaceutical companies that are investing in designing and trialling GABA modulators for a range of neurodevelopmental disorders. What these disorders have that Prader-Willi doesn't is a good animal model that allows scientists to investigate the GABA system and develop drugs accordingly. If we are to try and encapsulate all of the genetic differences in Prader-Willi in one animal model, the animals tend not to survive, which makes it harder to understand the GABA system. So we've designed a study that allows us to further understand how GABA is working in people with PWS in humans. So in autism, there have been a couple of clinical trials that have shown that people with autism respond differently to GABA modulators. Essentially, they give them they scan their brain, measure their GABA levels, give them the product, and then scan their brains again. And for some GABA modulators, for people with autism, their brain GABA levels go up, and typically developing controls taking the same drug, their GABA levels go down. Or the reverse could happen depending on what GABA modulators measured and what part of the brain. But essentially people with autism are having a completely different response to these GABA products, and we want to know whether that's also happening in people with Prader-Willi syndrome. Obviously it's important to know for prescribing products that work on the GABA system, but it'll also help us attract pharmaceutical companies' attention to invest in Prader-Willi syndrome. So we are conducting a study at the moment. We're only looking for 15 people with PWS and 15 age-matched controls, so peers or siblings of people with Prader-Willi. We're looking for people aged 18 to 30, which is a short age range, and that's because GABA levels can vary during childhood and adolescence and in older years, and so we want a really stable age range. Participants will be invited to come to Sydney to have a brain scan, then we'll provide a GABA modulator and then another brain scan. The modulator we're using is Acamprosate, and we chose it because we know it works on the GABA system without working on other systems as much, and it has a really good safety profile. It's FDA approved in the US, it's TGA approved in Australia, and we know that it's not going to have adverse side effects. In most of the studies that have been conducted to date in autism, they use a single dose of a GABA modulator. The only reason we can't do that in this study is because Acamprosate is absorbed by food, which means we would have to ask people to fast, and we never want to ask a person with Prader-Willi syndrome not to eat. So they have to take Acamprosate for 10 days, and that's purely just to have a baseline, to have enough Acamprosate in their body that it isn't impacted by how much they've eaten that day. So yeah, they just have the brain scan, 10 days of Acamprosate, and then another brain scan. And we have some funding available for participants who would like to come from interstate to participate. So this is a bit of a different clinical trial. We're not trying to say Acamprosate's the perfect GABA modulator and it's going to fix all of the behaviours. We're really just looking at does this product, do people with Prader-Willi syndrome respond differently to these products? And if so, that will help draw more funding and attention to the GABA system in people with PWS, which we think, and from some of the studies happening today, there's growing evidence to suggest that there's a GABAergic abnormality. That's it. So if you'd like to participate or just like to know more, please send me an email and I'm happy to send you some details or give you a call. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. David, Biobank, did you want to... Yep, okay, so if we can have the slides and you can go through. Yep, all of it.
So I'm not going to repeat the presentation, it was pretty good. Well done, Lauren.
We are streaming, so use
Yep, I'll just have one slide. So Laura's done a good job just describing, just to recap, we are recruiting 6 months and up. Inclusion criteria, diagnostic report confirming diagnosis of Prader-Willi syndrome, all subtypes. We are primarily recruiting right now from Victoria and New South Wales, but if you're from other states, you can provide us with your details, and when we have the funding to expand, or we think we will soon, we will get in touch with you and get you involved. The whole purpose of this, in addition to our studies, is to make the data available to other researchers and potentially to industry as well, so that the patients, the participants are not bothered too many times. What value this can add to, let's say, Lauren's study, for instance, if we're looking in brain tissues, in other aspects, and we're looking at how things are conserved in blood, and as well as all of these materials that are being collected, we are also collecting transcriptomic data, and we're adding other omics data. So while samples can be used up, the data can be shared infinitely, provided there's ethics to allow for it. So if you've got a clinical trial that's potentially looking an extra layer of stratification, if it's potentially not successful based on deletion versus non-deletion, there are other layers that you can go on top of it to see whether specific pathways that are more affected in some patients versus others may mean that it's effective for a subgroup of those individuals beyond the just deletion and non-deletion. And so that's where we're going with this. Obviously, there'll be other phases and ethics, etc., involved, but we've got a process to evaluate, and committee at the end is part of it, to evaluate people who apply for it, if there's ethics, and obviously it has to be consented through the participants who are already in this trial. So we'll probably need to get in touch with them again to get consent if it's a clinical trial where they've already consented to. So just linking the two things. I think that's it from me. Yeah, well, we've got 30 right now, so aim is to get to about 60 and potentially more. Yep, great, thank you.
Thanks, David. Sorry, I've forgotten your name. It's okay.
Thank you. My name is Iva Stenadová, and I am here representing a GenEqual research team. We are, or not really just research team, but the research program. So we are a team of researchers who are academic researchers and researchers who have themselves intellectual disability, because we strongly believe that no research should be happening without people with intellectual disability actually doing the research, not just being objects, but being in the research teams. So some of our co-researchers are here as well. We can go to next slide. We have talked to, I don't move it, sorry. Green, thank you. So we talked, this is my wonderful friend, one of our co-researchers, Julie Lobinsk, who is a very known self-advocate with intellectual disability, and we did interviews with 20 people around New South Wales initially, talked with them about their experiences with genetic healthcare and healthcare more broadly. And the people had different conditions, such as Prader-Willi syndrome, and they told us about what is good, but also what is not very good about the healthcare. For example, they are often brought by their families to the appointments without even understanding why they are there, and nobody making an attempt to do that. They gave us also some recommendations what need to change, and we have here video. I hope it works.
People made suggestions for how things could improve. Some examples are as follows. For doctors to explain things well, to stop and listen so that the patient can receive and process the information properly, for them to talk slowly, because sometimes they talk too fast and use too much jargon. The doctor needs to stop and check that the patient understands, and they need to use pictures where possible, and also easy read, which is kind of like what you have on the screen here. A picture on one side and words on the next. That's a simple example with bullet points and shorter words. Give people choices and use languages which make people feel respected.
Thank you. So this is Ska, one of our co-researchers, who is also associate investigator on an NHMRC funded grant. Based on what people told us that they want, people with intellectual disability, we created what we call education toolkit. And in that, we have developed 5 easy read resources explaining in easy read what is genetic health care, what to expect when you make appointments, how to make complaints. And I've brought some and they are in the room with resources. What is important that they are useful both for people with intellectual disabilities and their families, because they can really help to accessibly explain. We also created 2 videos which use like a current situation, take 1, which really depict just 2-minute videos, what people told us they experience in their appointments, and then 2-minute videos that depict what they told us they want to experience, which is inclusive, respectful, and person-centered genetic health care. The toolkit has been accessed by people from 53 countries, had many downloads, which we are of course happy, and very importantly is used by people with intellectual disability. We are now funded by the government and for 5 years, and we want to hear from people who have Prader-Willi syndrome to tell us about their experiences with healthcare and with genetic healthcare, and if they do not remember their encounters with genetic healthcare professionals, it's even their thoughts and experiences. These interviews are done, they are qualitative interviews, we talk. We sometimes use, if people prefer, arts-based methods, such as body mapping. The interviews are done by myself and my colleague Julie Lobbins, who you saw, who is a person with intellectual disability, just to make sure that the interviews are accessible to people and are respectful and inclusive. So if you want to, if you know about anybody who might be interested, we would be super grateful. And we also would love to talk to parents of high school students or young people who are up to 5 years out of school and who have Prader-Willi syndrome about their experiences with education, about healthcare and genetic healthcare in high school. We have done an analysis of current syllabus and curricula, including the life skills curriculum, and it should be included, but we know it's not. So we would also love to talk to families who will be interviewed by this wonderful Chia. Thank you very much for your attention. I didn't get chicken.
Wonderful, thank you. We have one final presentation, which is a video record. So if we can play that one now, and then we can have some questions and answers.
Hello, I'm Daryl Efron, paediatrician and researcher at the Murdoch Children's Research Institute. I'm interested in whether medicinal cannabis might be a helpful treatment for severe behaviour problems, aggression, self-injury, irritability and screaming in children with intellectual disability. These problems are seen in some kids with Prader-Willi syndrome. At the moment, these behavioural problems are really difficult to treat. We do have medications, but they're not always effective and they often cause side effects. Parents are increasingly asking us whether medicinal cannabis might be a good treatment for their children. We're interested to find out whether cannabidiol, known as CBD, might be an effective and a safe treatment. We're looking for children aged between 6 and 18 years old who have an intellectual disability and severe behaviour problems to take part in a 10-week trial of CBD. As the trial requires you to attend the hospital on 2 occasions, we're ideally looking for participants living in Victoria or New South Wales. Unfortunately, we do not have a budget to reimburse for interstate travel. The trial's running at the Royal Children's Hospital and at Monash Medical Centre in Melbourne and at the Children's Hospital Westmead in Sydney. In the trial, half the children get the active drug, CBD in oil, and the other half get just the oil with no CBD. which is the placebo. You won't know, and we won't know, which one your child is taking until the whole study has been completed. If your child's on other medications, they can continue to take those throughout the trial, with the exception of a small number of medications which can have interactions with CBD. If it seems your child may be eligible to participate, we'll organise a screening visit at the hospital. At this appointment, we'll ask questions and conduct assessments to determine whether your child is eligible to start the study medication, either CBD or placebo. After this, you'll be supplied medication, which would be given to your child twice a day for 10 weeks. In week 9, you will attend the hospital again so we can repeat some of our assessments. We'll also ask you to complete a number of questionnaires at the beginning and the end of the trial, which you can complete at home on your computer. We will call you several times during the trial to check in and make sure there's been no side effects. So if you're interested and you think your child might be eligible, please email us at the email address displayed on your screen, mctrials@mcri.edu.au, and a member of our study team will get back to you to discuss your child's suitability to participate. It would be helpful if your email could include your child's age, diagnosis, IQ range, if known, medications, and also your postcode. Thank you very much.
All right, so that's all our presentations. We've got about 7 minutes for questions. I am going to let the guys in. They need to move one of these stage things, but we can talk while they do that. With your questions, just a reminder that if you want to ask really personal, specific questions, tag the lead CI afterwards. But if you have general questions about the study, we'll open the floor. Yeah, that would be good, wouldn't it? Come on up, and I'll get a second mic as well.
Hello, my question's for Tania. Whereabouts are you going to be doing your studies and trial?
We're doing it in Sydney,
Okay, great.
but
thanks.
we don't have a lot of money because it's from the parents that we got the money. But how far are you? Oh, I shouldn't ask personal questions. We'll talk
That's okay.
later. It's in Sydney.
Hello. What do you classify as excessive daytime sleepiness? What is the, what do you need?
How we'll determine that are questionnaires that the caregiver answers, as well as a clinician global impression of the severity of sleepiness.
Yeah. And by sleepiness, do you just mean like the energy sleepiness? It doesn't actually have to be daytime sleeping.
It's excessive daytime sleepiness, so just that tiredness, not that they're necessarily falling asleep.
They don't have to necessarily be sleeping in the day.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's that exhaustion and
Yes.
tiredness that makes it hard to function in everyday life.
Great, thank you.
What's this one over here?
Kia ora, we've got some Kiwis here in New Zealand. We just wanted to know what the likelihood would be, how many patients would you need to do a trial site in New Zealand?
We wouldn't likely, again, because we're the US licensee of pitolisant, and so the sites that we've chosen. Now we do have the funding, because we're a pharmaceutical company, to have people travel, but I think it's probably problematic because at some of the visits you have to ship drug to the patients directly, and I don't know if that would be allowed. That might be a stumbling block. So even though we have the funding to allow people to travel to Australia, so the likelihood is I don't want to give any hope for that. We would not open a site in New Zealand at this time. If we had trouble enrolling, maybe we would consider it, but it's not in the plans right now, unfortunately.
I can add to that a little in a general sense. So in the last 5 or 6 years, I've had conversations with half a dozen different companies, and we ask that question. So this is no reflection on any specific company at all. And we often get told 3 to 4 at a site, and ideally 2 or 3 sites in a country. But there's an awful lot of caveats attached to that. But the numbers weren't as big as I thought they'd be in terms of what would make a viable site. So I think that, Joe, we've started some conversations that it's something that can be worked towards.
Yeah, because in rare disease, in general studies, you wouldn't open a country, but in rare disease, we have countries in Europe where there's only one site because that's just the way it is in rare disease.
I think if you're not running a trial in that country, you wouldn't mind people, though, accessing it, because if they have narcolepsy or cataplexy, they can still get their doctor to do an IPU and get it in, correct?
I can't speak to that
Would you like me to
from
have
my
a go at that
US
one?
perspective, yeah.
There can be a lot of, I think generally speaking, there can be a lot of variables. So some studies can absolutely be done that way, but for other studies, the travel can be a barrier to getting good, clean results, or, a lot of investigators will want to make sure they've got really good, clean trial design. So it's always worth asking the question, but you may or may not get the answer you want. So, further questions? Okay. Thank you all very much for hanging around. I know it's been a long day. Thank you very much to our panellists for sharing their studies. I would strongly encourage you to learn more about those trials. It is important that you ask lots of questions and that the trial is a good fit for you. Many of these investigators are around through tomorrow as well, and we have a poster out in the hallway which you can get further follow-up information if you want it. Thank you.